Hello,
Hi.
see you all coming in. That's good.
Hoping the noise isn't too much. The kids are home.
Oh, okay. Well, you can always mute if they get completely out of hand.
It'll only be the smallest one, so I kind of have to keep an ear out for her.
Okay, okay. How old is your smallest one?
She's 11 months.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Okay. You better keep an eye out. Good idea. Okay, so do you think we're waiting for others to come in? I was a little bit late. Um, So let's see who we've got. We've got Kerry and Suzanne, Michelle. Is that two Suzannes or the same? Same. And Jasmine, hi, and Susan. Okay, so that possibly is only a few. But we can charge ahead anyway, can't we? It's nearly 5 past. Okay, so today we've got a fair bit on because we're going to go through everything about how to do this task, the structure, the content, how to do the referencing, but we're also going to look at how do you use PowerPoint to your best advantage. So I'm going to show you some tips and tricks on that. So do hang around to the end if your PowerPoint skills aren't, brilliant. I'll show you how to put images in. I'll show you how to use smart art and how to make the screen look beautiful, all that sort of stuff. Okay, so basically you're presenting an argument about social inequality in Australia as a PowerPoint presentation. Now, what you've got to really focus on is your topic, but also social inequality in Australia. Okay, so you're not going global, you're staying here. And you're doing it as a PowerPoint, so that means following that genre. So you want to do it within the PowerPoint genre. When you finish doing that, you need to save as a PDF. That just makes it manageable. So if you're uploading PowerPoints to the group space or to Easts, they can get big and unmanageable because you've got images in them. They're going to get big and unmanageable with images anyway. So you need to be a little bit careful that your images aren't completely out of hand. Now, some images, might take up 30 MB space and others might take up 300,000. So you've got to be careful with that kind of thing, which usually can be demonstrated by if you cut and paste a picture in and it suddenly takes up the whole screen. You can go and reduce the pixels of it by just right-clicking on it and looking at its properties. Okay, then after you've saved as a PDF to make it manageable, you're going to add it to your group space and you're going to submit it to Easts. So it goes into the group space for your benefit of your peers and it's going to go to Easts to get marked. Whoa. And after everything's been uploaded, you get approximately a week to go in there and give 2 of your peers some feedback. So that's basically about learning from each other. It's not about marking. You're not being put in a position where you've got to become a marker. It's just about learning from each other. Okay, so when you give feedback, that's what the feedback should talk about, is what you've learned. So you do that for 2. You can do it for more, but you get marked for doing it for 2. Okay, now your goals is, of course, the focus on inequality. So that means, that you might provide some definitions around inequality, the particular type of inequality that is being experienced by the group that you're writing about. But remember, it's about inequality. So if you start talking about mental health, for instance, and you start describing every kind of mental illness that people in Australia are experiencing, and you telling us about that mental illness for, a few slides, then you're off topic. Okay, because your topic is, yes, mental illness, but it's not about the medical side of that mental illness. What we're interested in is what kind of inequalities are people who suffer from mental illness experiencing within the society. So that's a different thing. So you've got to do it. You've got to have that kind of background and context. What is mental illness? But you might not get seriously specific. Same with homelessness. You might be describing what is homelessness. That's really important. You've got to tell your reader what that is, but you don't want to go too far into it because your topic is about the inequalities faced by people who are living homeless. Okay, is that understandable? So yeah, there's a difference, as I've said here, between what is gender and what is gender inequality. So you just say what gender is briefly and then move on pretty quick. Okay, so your goal is also to educate. So your topic is inequality, and you want to educate people about the inequality faced by the group that you're covering. One of the things about this genre is it is supposed to be interesting and creative. So you don't want to just educate your reader, you want to engage them, you want to draw them in, and you use images in such a way as to be evocative of what you're trying to communicate. You use tables and graphs as a way to quickly communicate. And that's part of how we use the genre. It's the benefits of the genre, really. Okay, so people always say, is there a word limit? No, there is not. That's not confusing, no, because we do have a slide limit. So we don't go under 20 slides and we don't go over 30. And the limit is inclusive of your references at the end. So quite often people who do little tiny references, they do their references in 12 or 14 font instead of the usual, like the font on this slide, for instance, probably about 24, 28. So you go for small font so that you can fit lots in. And you want about 6 or 8 references, don't you? Okay, structure, the overview. So this is where you introduce your topic. So this is quite important because when you're saying what the inequality is, why there's an inequality and what exactly the problem is, you're also demonstrating to your reader that this is a serious issue. So you want to convey that. You want to be able to have your reader think, oh, yeah, this is quite a serious concern to the Australian population, to the way Australia runs. Here is a very serious inequality. So, yeah, you want to be able to put that across. And then you've also got to tell the reader what you will cover in the presentation. So it's like an introduction. An introduction always says, this is what is coming. So if you're using a particular type of theory, you'll also tell the reader then that you will be covering this theory. You might say what your argument is. So instead of just saying, this is what my topic is and this is what the inequalities are, you're also saying you will argue perhaps that, what is an argument that you might be arguing that incidences of mental illness are increasing in Australia, and this is because of the way it's being dealt with in terms of stigma and stereotyping. So you might be making an argument like that. And if you are making an argument like that, then of course the reader will then encounter some slides about stigma and some slides about stereotyping and how those things are contributing to the problem and making the problem worse. And you might say where that stigma and stereotyping is coming from. Is it partly coming from the media? Is it coming from a lack of communication from the health system and government about mental illness? So is there something that the health system and government can do to make their communication more sophisticated and more able to convey to people the to normalise mental health in the community, that everybody, you know, just like we have physical bodies, we have mental bodies in a sense, and mental illness is something anybody could suffer from, you know. So what are the health messages? So you might relate those health messages to stigma and stereotyping. Okay, so as far as inequality is concerned, you're going to explain what the main issues are. So often when we are encountering inequality, we're encountering multiple disadvantages. It might be that the type of inequality people are experiencing could lead to mental illness, or it could lead to homelessness, or, you know, like such as domestic violence leads to homelessness sometimes. So what happens? And how does it happen? You know, when does it happen? Who does it happen to? This is about implications. So you've got your topic, and then you're starting to go outwards and consider the implications and the consequences of this inequality. Be careful to use up-to-date stats and facts, because things change. So you want to be careful that any stats and facts that you are using are correct and accurate. And it can be a really good idea to use graphs and charts. They're often quite colourful and interesting. You can look at a chart and see the situation immediately, how many people are affected, and across a time frame, and, you know, across states and all of that kind of thing. So they're an effective way to communicate with your reader. And then if you want to add something to it, you can do that with text on another part of the page where you discuss the chart. So they're really useful. And you can get them from, you know, government websites and stuff, and you can copy and paste them. That's where I often get mine from. Now, how do you, oh, we have a question.
I'm looking at the rural decline part, and I was wondering, as far as stats and facts goes, there's a show on ABC called Landline. Is that a reliable source for me to use?
Yeah, I think it's okay. I think it's okay to bring media in, but you've got to be careful that your media and your websites and everything don't replace your literature. So you still need to, you know, like have those 6 sources of literature, but then be adding the reports and the media and the websites to them.
Oh no, I'm a little bit confused because in the presentation it says do not use multimedia videos.
Oh yes, but she didn't say she'd use a video. She said she would use it as a source.
Okay, so you can, yes, so you can use it as a source, but don't put it in the actual PowerPoint. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Okay, awesome.
that's okay. It's just because sometimes people will put a little video in of something or a little snapshot of a TV show, and then they get devastated when no one can watch it. You know, the link often corrupts, breaks down, won't open, and then you've got all these other students in your group saying, I can't open it, and the person saying, my whole presentation relies on this. So that's why I say don't use them. Okay, so if you're adding a theory, and it's a very good idea to do this, and you know, things like social exclusion can be a theory, but they can also come from theorists, like you might use Bourdieu's theory of social capital, something like that. Depends on your topic. Your theoretical explanation, of course, has to align with your topic. So you wouldn't be doing violence against women and then use a Marxist theory, for instance. But you could use a Marxist theory if you were using, if your topic had anything to do with economics. Okay, so we use theory because it helps us understand the problem. It provides us with a, you know, we can understand patterns in social inequality. We're often looking at patterns and trends across society, and that's why it's important to use stats and facts, because we can see that a large section of the population is affected by a particular inequality, and we can measure that using stats and facts. We can see what people's income is, we can see you know, where people are living, what their level of education is, what their health is like. We can measure this with all sorts of population surveys that occur on a government level and a health level, even education. You know, we're collecting data about students all the time at the university. So we can see a lot about people, and then we have all this information, and the theory helps us understand why this is so. So if we've got a population that's being affected by a particular type of inequality, why? Why this population? What's leading to that? What's adding to it? It's the only way we can really understand how to create meaningful change. Okay, so we want to make sure our theory aligns with our topic. So you might want to ask me about that. So if you're doing class, you might use Bourdieu, just because it's more of an updated, more of a contemporary analysis of class than Marxism would be. I do recommend that people use a Marxist theory when we are looking at some of our global inequality issues. The disparity between wealth and poverty of the first and third worlds makes Marxism quite relevant. But when it comes to the class system in this country, it might be more appropriate to use Bourdieu. If we're looking at violence against women, we're going to use a feminist theory, because feminist theory helps us understand why there's so much violence against women in society. We're looking at people with mental illness. I think social exclusion theory, which you find in your textbook, is highly relevant. So be careful about that. Sometimes people have learnt a little bit about the different theories, and so they'll put 3 or 4 in their theory section, and that's not really the approach that you want to take. You want to have one theory and use it to explore the issues. So you'll say what it is, and then you'll start applying it to your topic. So first define it, and then use it. Now I can't see that. Okay, so you can use the concept of othering and so on. So, you know, contact me. If you're a little bit unsure what to use, you can contact me. I'll help you with that. Does anybody know what their topic is and what theory they're using yet? You had some thoughts? No, Kerry's not sure. Jasmine's shaking her head. I can't see anybody else.
Donna, can I ask you a question?
Sure. Who's that?
Vanessa. Hang on, I'll put my video on so you can see me
Okie dokie.
if it works. Oh, there you go. Hi. I just wanted to ask about theories relevant to youth and childhood. Because I am struggling to nail that down, as I think I'm focusing too much on the different groups in youth, like Indigenous Australians and those living in poverty and that kind of thing. And I'm wondering if we should take the approach more thinking about youth as a social, like a category or construct rather than each individual kind of group. And how, what kind of theory would work with that?
Right, so it sounds like you're perhaps getting a little bit too involved in what is youth and what is childhood.
Yes, I think that's what's happening.
Yeah, so you could probably drop it now and move on to inequalities experienced in youth and childhood. And then that theory is going to have a direct relationship to the inequality that you focus on.
Okay.
So whether or not you do like a broad sweep of the inequalities, or whether you decide you're going to focus on education, or you're going to focus on dysfunctions that can occur in the family.
Okay. Do you think, I was looking at one of the in to do with education was the cultural capital and that kind of thing. Is that something relevant to youth? Obviously,
Absolutely.
less of that dependent on education.
Yes. So I was going to suggest that if you were using education, that you do use something of Bourdieu's.
Yep.
And if you were, looking at crime, for instance, you could use a labelling theory for that. And if you were doing the broad sweep, that would make it a little bit more difficult to pin down. But again, I think we could probably go back to Bourdieu for that. Yeah.
That's kind of what I was thinking. And Okay. Cool. Thank you.
Pleasure. Okay. Anyone else want to talk about the theory they've chosen? Nope, we're all very quiet on a Tuesday morning. I don't blame you. Okay. Yep.
Sorry, I didn't think you saw me. I put my hand up. I'm thinking for rural decline, Bourdieu might be the one to go with as well, because I'm looking at isolation realistically, because that's what rural decline seems to be hinging on. Is Bourdieu the appropriate one for that?
Yeah, look, I think, Bourdieu is really good for many topics. But there are others that you can use. For instance, the basic theory of social isolation often works for rural and remote, because there is a real issue there with people becoming isolated. But if you're looking at a problem of government and neoliberalism, like we've taken...
I was thinking about Marx purely because of the capitalist stuff that's involved there, because that seems to be a real stopping block for most people living in rural communities and farmers in general. So the agricultural sector is really impacted by government.
Yes.
And I know that Marx addresses that quite a bit within capitalism and neoliberalism, but is that too far back, or is there someone more recent that I should be looking at?
You might be going too far back with Marx for that, because the issue is neoliberalism, which is a system of government that most Western governments are using. And it's also an issue of globalization. So, you know, we used to have tariffs on trade that we don't have anymore. So our farmers are competing with farmers all over the world. And, you know, farmers in other countries can do things for cheaper because they've got a different kind of economy. It makes that, you know, that competition makes things really difficult. Also, we've had a decline in agriculture because we are importing so much from other countries. So this is the problem is globalization and neoliberalism, which you could use both of those concepts as a theoretical basis to understand the problem. In which case,
really big. It's very broad.
But in which case but this is only if you're looking at the economics. If you're looking at the inequalities that are happening for people in rural areas that have got to do with that decline. So what's happening for people in rural areas that are declining is that they are becoming depressed, that they are becoming socially isolated, that, you know, as those communities around them erode and young people out-migrate from those communities and aren't there anymore, services leave, that there is this well-being that is eroding. So if you were looking at that, then you're going to look at a different kind of theory to understand that. But you could still stay with the neoliberalism and globalization. And all that would require is for you to say what neoliberalism and globalization are, short paragraph, you know, a couple of sentences, this is what they are, this is how they're affecting, this is the impact, you know, on the rural communities. It means that, you know, they're going into decline.
All of those services just vanish.
Yeah, yes. And the more they decline, you know, the more people take services away, the more people leave, then the more they decline. And it becomes this vicious circle. So you could just say what that vicious circle is.
So I don't have to go too much into depth with that. What's happening at the very individual level. We're going to go back to realistically what the source of that decline is.
Yeah,
that's the intention.
Yes. Well, that sounds really good. And yeah, like I said, then you don't have to, you know, use a theorist, because when you're using theory, you can use a theorist and this theorist's ideas, or you can use something like the theory of social isolation, or use neoliberalism as a theory to understand the problem.
Awesome. Thank you.
That's okay. And I've got a couple of comments, so I'm going to have a look at them because it might be someone who can't talk. Okay, Michelle's saying it's a minimum of 8 and I've been saying 6. Thank you, Michelle. I could not remember that off the top of my head if it was 6 or 8. And Elke's listening in the car, and the subject is the elderly. Great. Okay. Now, this part is the part that students often neglect, but you should not neglect it. You should give it equal weighting. It's an important part. And it's about what the solutions are, because remember, we don't want to get bogged down in, look how terrible the world is. This is a world that's constantly in change and flux and is in a process of social evolution. So things do get better. And there's all sorts of reasons why they get better, ethically, morally. We have social movements, we live in a democracy and so on. So we have institutions and structures that are set up to help people and to enable people to live a good life. So we do definitely live in a society where living a good life is something that we strive for. Now, the theory of inequality is definitely looking at what happens, what groups get left behind from these ideals and what happens to them when they do get left behind. But how do we make sure they don't get left behind? So this is pretty important. Sometimes this is revolutionary. Sometimes it's got to do with the power of the people. And sometimes it's got to do with what's happening on that institutional level. And, you know, the deinstitutionalization of the asylum, for instance, people with mental illness living in asylums and being locked away, and the merging of those people into society has been extremely useful for a lot of people. People associate it with homelessness also, because there are perhaps some people that need extra help. But there is all sorts of things happening. We have community services, we have women's shelters and so on. We also have media input that can be really useful. So, you know, what's happening in the media that's important and instrumental in change. So this part is about what's happening in the world that's positive and creates change. It's also sometimes a trajectory. So it started happening in the past, and you might want to go back there. So in the 1960s or 70s, something might have occurred that was unusual and groundbreaking. And from that has emerged this process of change that is still in process. So you might want to talk about it on that level. Or it might be something that's just happening now, which is amazing and that you want to talk about. So homelessness, for instance, you know, people are looking at those tiny homes. So perhaps not seeing the institutionalization as being really helpful, you know, the shelters for them to sleep at night. It's not providing them a home, but it provides them a roof for the night if they can get in. And also the vans that go around providing food, like a portable soup kitchen. So people might not see that as creating change and as very beneficial, but they might see the tiny home movement as beneficial. Some people are trying to bring homeless people into areas where they can have a little dwelling that they can call their own. So you might look at something that's happening on that level. Yeah, like if you're doing education, you could look at the Finnish system, what's happening in Finland with their innovative education system, best education system in the world. And as you know, as of this week, if you're watching the lecture, Australia has been plummeting to the bottom of developed countries' education systems. So if you're looking at changes in our education system, could you look at another country for answers? So this part of your work acknowledges and emphasises social change and also social justice. And it's acknowledging that these things have occurred in the past and are occurring now and can occur in the future. So it's quite an important part. So like I said with the last assessment, if you're at the point where you've just done too much on that beginning section, you just go back and edit it to leave room for this section. Now, how strict are you to be about the balance of each section? Now, example presentations, which I'm about to show you, don't have an equal distribution of the three parts, but how well distributed should it be? Well, some balance should be sought, but I would recommend not having as much theory as you have with the other two sections, that it wouldn't necessarily be required. I don't want to restrict anybody though, so some students might be theory heads and we are really understanding this problem through their theory, and so therefore they want it to be quite long and involved, and they're going to include some pictures and everything, and they're going to include maybe some graphs and, you know, diagrams, models to make it clear to people. So it's about how you find that balance. But if it's a case of, well, you know, your theory section really doesn't say anything, then that's not good. You want your theory section to say something. You want your ways forward to be meaningful as well and not an afterthought. Okay. Now, presentation is definitely part of the assessment criteria. So that's important. So, you know, as you can see here, I'm using a coloured background. You don't want to use a white background. It's not as nice, not as engaging. Some students do have a short activity, a task to be performed as part of their way of engaging their peers, because that kind of engagement, how engaging is your presentation? It's a learning experience for people. Instead of they want to look at it, is it more interesting to like look at my lectures if there's lots of pictures in them and other materials in them rather than just like this one, just words and stuff like that. And remember, you don't have a voiceover. So you're trying to use the genre to the best of its ability, given that there's no voiceover. Okay, so you want your fonts and your headings to be large and striking. I can show you how to choose them if you don't know. Dot points are a good way to display text rather than having all the text in one big paragraph. And we're going to look at all these images, photos, and features. As they say, a picture can tell 1,000 words. Okay, a quick note on peer feedback. As I said before, it's about what you learn from your peer about that inequality. So when you give some feedback, you talk about what you learned, what was new, what didn't you know before and surprised you, or that you found particularly interesting or disturbing. Or perhaps you knew something about it, but not a lot, or the way they've explained it was really useful. And their presentation might have been very evocative, so you realised the seriousness and importance of the topic in a way you hadn't before. Just remember to be polite and constructive. You're not marking, remember that. So you're not trying to emulate a marker. And you might want to just respond to your peers too if they're particularly encouraging. And also, I just wanted to make a note about not leaving people out. So if you go into your group and somebody's already had 3 people, give them some feedback, and there's a couple of people who've had no one, could you please give the feedback to those that didn't have anybody? So that you're careful about everybody gets to have some feedback. That would be really helpful, because I think would be awful if somebody got left out. Okay, so you want to do approximately 200 words per person. So it's not very much. It won't take you very long. And you don't want it to be absolutely, terribly written, but you're not really being marked on, you don't have to have references. It doesn't have to be grammatically correct. Okay, here we go. Here's the referencing, 8 references. Now remember, you don't get marked on the references that are in your reference list so much as you get marked on how you've used them. So if you've got 12, 15, 20 references in your reference list, that's not impressive to us if they are not in the body of your work also. So you want to engage them, you want to use them. Now, has everybody seen the resources section of Interact where the readings are? So I've put a lot of readings in there for your purposes. And there's readings on theory, so you'll find, Bourdieu's original forms of capital paper in there. Weston Zimmerman's original paper on gender. So I've got some seminal works like that in there, and I've also got some up-to-date research papers in there. So they'll give you a good start. And if you particularly like an article and you want more, you can always put the article title into Google Scholar. And what happens when you put it into Google Scholar is it will pop up, and underneath it, there's a little bit right at the very bottom that says how many people have cited that article. And if you click on that, all the people who have used that article as a citation, their papers come up. So you can see what they've written and what I do that a lot, and I find papers that are of interest to me because it's, on the same topic, along the same lines. They also love the paper I'm looking up. So, okay. Papers for this 8 minimum sources of literature, they do need to be peer reviewed. So they need to be books or journal articles or book chapters. Your textbook can be one of them. Now I say not too old, but when we're talking about a seminal work, it's okay if they're old. So I just said the Weston Zimmerman article, everybody's still using it. It hasn't been bettered. It has, it is what we call a seminal work. Same with the Bourdieu, anything Bourdieu wrote, you can use. Sometimes the way to find out whether something is a seminal work is you'll notice, so you're doing youth and you're looking through an article and you see a reference you like the sound of. You look in the other articles, you'll often find that they've also cited them, and it might be a 1977 article, but everybody who's writing about youth is still using that article. So it's still considered really good, and we call them a seminal work. Sometimes they're the papers that have broken the ground. The Weston Zimmerman articles like that, they broke ground in talking about gender as we do our gender. Gender is something we do, not something we are. So, that was their original idea. Okay, but when it comes to stats and facts, when it comes to what's the updated information, then you need a reasonably recent article. Websites too, like you want to stay away from blogs. Anybody can write a blog. I could write a blog about, fashion if I wanted to. It doesn't mean I know anything about fashion. So if you're going to use websites, you need to stick to those very reputable sources, like the United Nations, like any government produced website. They usually have, you know, they're monitored. People are very careful about what they put on them. Can't have any Joe Blow put something on them. And referencing images occurs separately, and you're supposed to reference the image, and I don't want you to worry about it. I'm going to show you how to do it in 2 seconds. I think I covered that. Yeah, so you can go back and use these slides if you want to. They just show you how to figure out whether, you know, something that's really old is good and or not. Also, if it's in those references in the resources section and it's old, you can use it because I've put it there. It's already been determined to be a good paper. Okay, so let's have a look at how to use this to the best of our benefit. Okay, so you can see.
Donna, can I just interrupt before you go into that, if that's all right?
Sure.
So I'm just going through the presentation, and it says that the reference list has to be APA 6.
Does it?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Not right, is it? Okay.
No,
Cool.
use 7. But, you know, this is our first semester of using 7. So I think we have to be relaxed about it.
I just thought I better check because I know some lecturers are saying absolutely not. It's now moved over, and then I've got some that are saying, so I thought, I just better check.
Yeah. I'm erring on the side of if people did 6 really well.
Okay.
I'm not going to have a fit about that.
Okay. Awesome.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Because it is hard. It's, you know, referencing is hard, and you know.
Yeah. Appreciate. Thank you.
Okay, so if we want to use anything at all, right, we just go up here. So design allows you to choose all of these. Some of them are awful. A lot of students end up choosing their own, but all you have to do is click on it and change the whole presentation. See that? And you've got something completely different. If you don't like it, you just hit this undo button at the top there, which is pretty easy. And then back it goes. So you can choose any of those, and you can also get some off the internet and, you know, use any kind you like, or you can actually just change it also from here. So I can say from here that I'd like something else changed, and that's just, you're in design, you go to format background, you can change it to solid fill, and, you know, I can make it a hideous pink color should I want to, or, you know, decide I don't want to and change it back. So there's quite a lot that you can do. You probably, you know, a lot of you already know about things like the font, just choosing this kind of business. It can be very difficult not to get obsessed with these details too. I suggest doing them at the last minute when you've already got your content. However, I don't always listen to that advice. Insert is where you get to have all the fun. So you can put in your own charts just by doing that. And then you can create your own charts. I don't usually do that. I usually will copy and paste a chart in from somewhere else. So I'm not looking to make an original, and I should suspect you're not either. Really. You can also use these. You just, if you're familiar with Word, then you'll probably be okay with any of things like the charts. Now, Smart Art's fun because there's lots of different kinds of Smart Arts that you can use. You might see from some of my presentations that I really like Smart Art. The good thing about Smart Art, I'll show you, is that we can put things in it. Can't type now. So if we put all these things in it, we can remove these ones. See, we can play around with it and it's quite fun. Another thing we can do that's really good, just going to put all the students over there, is that we can, oh look, I've got one I did previously. When you want to put an image in it, you just go to where you have all your pictures. And then I've got all these pictures here. Sometimes for the Smart Art, they're a little bit too big. I think that one should be all right. So you just click on the, double click on the image, say that you want to get it from a file, go to somewhere where you've got your pictures saved. I usually get them, you know, from Google Images or from a free image place. Look at this one, it's funny. Depressed, you might be suffering from capitalism. And then you might decide, oh, okay, well, I actually don't like this. I'm going to change it. So you can just change it. So you just go click on it. You've got to click on it. And then you can go into design and you can choose any of these. Change it to something else. And you'll end up with your favorites. But you can also, this is all a particular type of layout. You remember when we started, I was using a cycle. So I can change that to a cycle, but it looks weird. See, the pictures have gone. So I need to go back to something that's got images. And I don't think the cycles do, no. So you've got lists, you've got processes, which I quite enjoy using also, like ones like that. You can also change the color of them through here. To make them pretty like that. You don't like anything, just go back. You might want to go back to something like that. So that's Smart Art. Images are equally as easy. You just either click on here where it says pictures, or you go to insert and click on pictures. So if we click on pictures, we just end up here again. And we add the picture. If the picture's too big or too small, we just move it around like that. And it may be that we want to, let's get rid of that, get rid of this. And it might be that we want to change the layout. So we're just in home, we go to layout, and one that I quite like these days isn't in there. Okay, so my way around that, say I want a very big picture to take up the whole screen, can do that. And you might notice that sometimes I like to do this with my PowerPoints. A whole picture. So how am I going to get words in there, do you think? I'll show you. I go to insert and I go to shapes. And you can use any shape that you want to. I'm rather fond of these ones these days. So did you see that? I went to shapes. And I went right down the bottom and I chose these little thought bubbles. You can choose any kind of thought bubble that you want, but you can also choose arrows. Sometimes I use arrows. You can choose circles and squares. But if you choose one of these things, you just go like that and put it in, and then you can write in it all sorts of info. See, I can change that too. I can change the color of it, make it dark purple. I can actually change the, I can make it, you know, make it have an interesting outside, and I can actually change the entire shape with edit shape. See that there? And if I'm in shapes, in format, if I click out of it, it doesn't work, but if I click on it, I can be in format and it can show me all these shapes here. So I can edit the shape, I can change it to anything I want. So I can make it like that one. I can also change this around. So say I've got a person speaking, I can put that right next to their head. I can have another person speaking and do another, put another one in by just clicking on it. You can't see, like, copy and paste and then write in it. Doesn't work. You have to put them in. This one I can write in. See? So it's pretty easy, isn't it? The other thing that you need to know, apart from putting in pictures and putting in, you can also superimpose a picture over the top of that. I'll show you. Just go to insert, go to pictures. We'll choose another picture that we can put in that space. Now this one's going to be huge. Oh no, it's not. No, I didn't like it. Okay, so maybe you can't do that. I thought I could. You might need to put a text box in. If you really want to put something in there, you can create a text box and then insert your picture into that, I think. We'll just try anything. There we go. So it pops in, so you can have another picture. So the other thing that you need to know is, let's go here. I just put a new slide in, see that? I just pop a new slide in and in it goes. It will usually copy whatever kind of slide that was. So we change the layout of the slide. So you can choose something like this, where you've got a big heading and then lots of little headings and then text under here. Depending on the design that you've chosen, you will get different options for your slide layout. But here I use this one a lot, so I have text here and a picture here. And again, that's just a case of insert picture, and it will stay within that square. That didn't happen. Oh, there we go. It was just a bit slow. And it's done something weird. This happens. Weird things happen. I'm wondering why. Yeah, there we go. It's just being a bit slow. And you can move everything. Everything can be moved. Like you might not want to have a title there, so you can just delete it, click on it, delete it, or you can make it smaller. Put it up in the corner. You can put it down here if you want to. You can do what you like with it, and then you can like change that layout again. What else do you think you might like to know? What else could I help you with? Do you think? Does it seem manageable? Okay. Oh, this is how to reference an image. Now, a lot of the time you get free images from a site. I often just type in free images and something comes up. Pixabay is where this one came from. So you always put figure 1 and then you put, and I always feel bad telling you to do this because I don't do a very good job of it myself. I try and reference images, but I don't always do it well. To feel like a hypocrite. Okay, I'm just looking for my chat. Somebody's made a comment. Okay, Michelle, you can always come back and watch it at another time. I'll put it up today. So for this one, you just put figure 1. It's a graffiti about work, Pixabay, and the date. Or just have to move this up so I can see it. Or you can just put figure 1 in the website. And that's the style I often choose. Figure 1 and the website. Now that's if it's free. If it's not free, it's different. So here's a Plato quote. So you say figure 2, it's a Plato quote. It comes from this website, and there's the website. So it can be really handy to put your images in and reference them as you go. If you do what I've done here, I've got a whole lot of pictures saved into here, then you might wonder why I've got all these hand signals. I was just talking to a theory class about symbolic interactionism, which is the theory of using symbols, and they were hand symbols. So the way I've saved these isn't very helpful, but you could save them with the reference. And I have done that in the past, and it has been really useful to me to save the image with the reference. And then when I go to put it in somewhere, I've already got the reference. But one of the simplest ways is to get them all from the same website, and then you've got your website where they've come from. So they've come from Pixabay. It was 2020 when you got them, and all you have to do is put figure 1 and the, make up a name for it. The problem with doing it that way is that those free websites don't always have the best pictures. Google Scholar where you'll find the best pictures. Okay, so the very last thing I wanted to do with you briefly today, and you're probably really tired, is have a quick look at, so I'm going to stop that, a couple of other presentations.
Just a quick question, Donna. With the posting of our assessment, must we put it into East first before we post it to our group, or can it go either way?
Doesn't matter.
Okay, cool. That's all right.
Okay, so here's a couple of presentations.
Sorry to interrupt, Donna. May I quickly ask one final question on the referencing before we move on?
Oh, yes, of course.
Thank you. It was just in relation to, do we only reference those images in the presentation itself and not in the reference list? Did you say that was done separately?
Yeah, I don't think you need you don't need a reference list.
So the reference list is only purely for our journal articles books,
yes,
and the images are referenced in the presentation. Thank you. Cool.
Yeah, you don't want to have to do them twice. Okay, so we're just going to have a quick look at a couple of these, because I've given you some examples in the resources section. None of them are HDs. Okay, I wanted to give you the opportunity to analyze what you see there. So look at that, you know, do you love that as a front page? Do people like that? I like it. I think it's a really engaging, vivid front page. So what do you think of that as a way of displaying text? There's a fair bit of text there. The genre says not to use a lot of text. I tend to use a lot of text because I want the PowerPoint to be a learning opportunity for the students. I want you to be able to go to it and find information. So I'm not going to use one word that then if you go back to it, you won't understand. So you're going to be in the same position as me. You're probably going to use more text, you err on the side of more text, but you want that text to be able to be consumed by your reader in an easy way. So you have to think about what you like the best. So here's an example of using a chart and then having some words to talk about that chart. Now here's a slide with not much text at all. So to me, that seems like quite a good balance of using text and not using text. So think too about, you know, when you're looking at these, what's the reader doing? Is the reader, what's the balance between the theory, talking about the inequality, the ways forward? So we're getting to about halfway through, and here we've got a lot of theory. We've got discourse theory, we've got Foucault, we've got post-colonial theory. We're starting with concepts, race and racism. Othering, Orientalism and post-colonial theory. So have a look at that one, and discourse theory. Have a look at that one and consider how much can you learn about a lot of different kinds of theory. And do you think it's better to focus on just one? Or in this context, does it work? Okay, now we have the way forward. So a little bit sidelined, do you think? So here's another one. What do you think of that front cover? Quite a bit of text. These are shapes that the person's used. This is possibly smart art down the side with a shape in the centre. Looks quite good. Are you drawing your own conclusions as you sit there quietly? Are you thinking, whether you like this amount of text or whether you don't? So think about what you like and what you don't, what you think is a good balance and what you don't think is a good balance. Like, it's up to you to decide. This one's just used Bourdieu. Also looking at neoliberalism. Using the chalkboard's interesting, isn't it? Two slides on ways forward. So they would have been marked down for that. Okay, well, I'm going to leave it there. I'll leave you to look at these other ones. There's one on mental illness and income equality. That looks fantastic, doesn't it? I always think that some of these front covers are amazing. So I'll leave you to look at them and analyse them. And stay in touch if you need to email. Also going to be running this exact same presentation tomorrow night, so if you want to come along again, that's fine. And otherwise, I'll be uploading it. I hope you have a good week and I hope you have a good study break. So that's a 2-week study break, remember? Okay. People are chatting. I'm just going to check it. Bye, Susan. Thank you. And bye, Jasmine. Bye, Kerry. Bye.